Are you convinced that probiotics don't agree with you? Think again. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lucy, your friendly neighborhood FNTP, and I help adventurers to naturally autopilot their immune systems so that they can get back to enjoying their experience-driven lives. In this video, I want to talk about the 3 different kinds of probiotics and how to use them. Below in the description box, you'll find a free product guide all about the kinds of probiotics that I'm going to discuss in this video with dosing instructions, as well as how to use them in your everyday routine. So be sure to check that out. So let's jump in. It is such a common sentiment that I hear in my practice that either people think that probiotics do not agree with them or that they don't do anything for them. And the truth of the matter is that there are so many different kinds of probiotics and that we need to really have experimented with all of the different kinds in order to be able to draw conclusions like that. And to be honest, when people actually work through the 3 different kinds of probiotics or use them together, like I suggest, I've pretty much never had somebody say, oh, that didn't do anything for me, or they didn't agree with me, or whatever. First of all, let's start by looking at the long list of conditions that probiotic interventions have been shown to help. So for the vast majority of these conditions, the regular use of probiotics actually worked to mitigate symptoms and normalize lab work. If you're suffering from an autoimmune condition, this is pertinent for you. If you're new to this game, probiotics are simply beneficial microbes that we can take therapeutically to improve our gut health and, by extension, our immune health. When we take probiotics, they work in 2 different ways. First, they give us a healthy dose of beneficial microbes. And those beneficial microbes provide important services for the human body. Some of these services include producing B vitamins, producing the vitamin K2, and also producing short-chain fatty acids like butyric acid, which are really important for our colonic cells and intestinal health. They also assist us in digesting our food. Now, there's another way that probiotics really help us, and this way doesn't really get a whole lot of acknowledgement by practitioners. And that is acting as an antimicrobial. So when we ingest beneficial microbes, those microbes can colonize our intestinal tracts and actually work to crowd out any guys who are not supposed to be there, pathogens or overgrowths of any kind. And what's great about probiotics as an antimicrobial is that it's a very gentle effect. So if you suspect that you might have some kind of dysbiotic activity happening in your intestines, but you're not ready to embark on any kind of strong antibiotic or herbal antimicrobial, which are pretty potent, you could try the probiotic regimen outlined in the attached handout that uses all 3 of these kinds of probiotics to see if that results in any kind of normalization for you. So before we talk about the kinds of probiotics that you'll find in supplement products, I want to just briefly nod my head at the fact that you can get probiotics in food and in nature. First, let's talk about food. So if you've watched my video on the 9 principles of an ancestral diet, you'll know that one of those principles was eating copious amounts of fermented foods. This was just a norm for ancestral peoples. And that's for a couple of different reasons. Often that was just the best way to preserve fresh vegetables or fruit, but they were also associated with health benefits. So some great options for fermented foods are beverages like kombucha, beet kvass, fermented vegetables like sauerkraut, kimchi, or homemade pickles, or fermented forms of dairy, if you tolerate dairy. And make sure that the dairy is well sourced, pastured, raw if possible, full fat. Options for this would include kefir, yogurt, sour cream, and aged cheeses, among many others. So I highly suggest that if you have not already, definitely incorporate a form of fermented food into your diet pretty regularly. Now you can also get probiotics from your environment. Actually, every single place that we occupy, whether we're indoors, sleeping in our beds, outside, taking a walk, in the office, whatever place we are, each place has a unique microbiome, and we're constantly breathing those in, coming into contact with them on our skin, potentially ingesting them by touching our face. So actually, the environments that we occupy can have a pretty significant impact on our internal microbiome. So the microbes that are found outside in nature, especially in soil and fresh water, are really important staple presences for our gut. So it's important that we occupy outside environments where we have lots of exposure to those beneficial microbes pretty regularly. In contrast, places like hospitals or super sterilized environments are often full of things like superbugs that, if they get into our system, can really cause some trouble. So you really want to avoid being in places that are just overly sterilized and don't have beneficial microbial presence. In addition to that, I would highly suggest that you avoid using antibacterials or antimicrobial agents in your home. I know that that might be a little bit of a tall order given our current pandemic that we're in the middle of, but I would just try to keep that product utilization to a minimum. And actually focusing more on probiotics to make sure that your inner terrain is optimal is probably a much more powerful tool at preventing any kind of infection than constantly sterilizing your environment. And I'll probably talk more about that in an upcoming video. So even though we can get healthy doses of probiotics from our food and from being in an outdoor environment, sometimes, especially for people with chronic conditions or gut issues, it's really useful to use a supplemental form of probiotic because it packs a much more concentrated, intensive, therapeutic dose. So when it comes to these supplements, there are 3 different categories of probiotics that we'll go over now. So the first are Lacto-Bifido blends. So Lactobacillus and Bifido are the genuses of many kinds of beneficial microbes. And this is what the vast majority of probiotic blends on the market consist of. This is the category that also has the most research behind it in terms of assigning benefit to their use. What's important to understand about Lacto-Bifido blends is that they're transient. When we get exposed to them, either by eating food or breathing them in from our environment, they sort of pass through us, and while they're passing through us, they provide those health benefits that I mentioned previously. However, they do not take up residence. So we need to constantly be re-inoculating our systems with these species. We can't expect to do an intensive round of Lacto-Bifida and then be set for life. We just constantly need to be thinking about re-inoculating ourselves with these species. If you've never taken probiotics before, I actually don't suggest starting with this type, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the next category. Conversely, if you have tried probiotics before, it's likely that you've tried this kind, and if you've come to the conclusion, oh, that doesn't work for me, or it doesn't do anything for me, I would challenge that. The order in which you take these 3 different categories of probiotics can actually really impact whether or not each one is impactful and effective. So let's go to the next category so that we can examine this idea a little bit further. Okay, so category 2 is spore-based or soil-based probiotics. And typically the genus associated with this category of probiotics is referred to as Bacillus. So this is typically where I recommend that people start. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One, spore-based probiotics tend to be the most well tolerated, especially for sensitive populations. So if you have a chronic condition, perhaps you've tried Lacto-Bacillus blends before, but have found yourself to sort of react to them, I would definitely suggest starting with a spore-based blend before you do anything else with Lacto-Bifido blends. So it's well tolerated. The second reason is that soil-based probiotics are what we call native, rather than transient, like Lacto-Bifido. So native probiotics, when we ingest them, they actually have the ability to colonize and stay in our guts. This is especially important when considering the findings of a recent study. This study found that participants who were not breastfed as infants, and by extension were not exposed to the Lacto-Bifida bacteria from their mothers to help populate their little guts, those people actually had an immune response to Lacto-Bifida strains. So this could definitely help to explain why some people don't do well with Lacto-Bifido blends to begin with. Now, caveat, the study went on to examine after those same participants supplemented with the spore-based probiotics, the Bacillus genus, and those strains were allowed the opportunity to take up residence in their GI tracts. Then they tried to take the Lacto-Bifido blends again, and all of a sudden, their bodies could accept those probiotic strains and glean all of the health benefits associated with those strains, rather than attacking them. So actually, starting with Bacillus or spore-based probiotics can actually optimize your internal terrain so that you're better able to receive the benefits of a Lacto-Bifido blend. So always start with spore-based probiotics. And just a reminder, I have specific product recommendations in the attached product guide in the description box. And all of those products are available to order on my Fullscript site. Just go to gutsygreen.com, click on place an order, and then create your Fullscript account, and you'll have full access to the catalog. Let's talk about the third category, which is actually a beneficial yeast and not a bacteria. This is called S. Boulardii, or I've heard some people say S. Boulardii, but I think that that's a really weird way to say it, so I'm just going to say S. Boulardii. As a warning, you should not use this product if you are immunocompromised in any way, as an overgrowth of this beneficial yeast might work to your detriment. But as long as you have a normal functioning immune system, or an overactive immune system in my case, you'll be just fine. So S. Boulardii in particular is a great antimicrobial, and it's especially good for digestive issues. So if you're one of the 1 in 5 people in America who suffers from IBS, I would definitely suggest adding in S. Boulardii to your routine. Hopefully it's a little bit clearer now why when people are like, I don't react well to probiotics, that isn't really giving us enough information, because there are 3 specific kinds of probiotics, and it's highly unlikely that you don't react well to any of them. And in fact, as I mentioned before, taking type 2, the spore-based kind of probiotic, can actually increase your tolerance for the other kinds of probiotics and your ability to glean benefit from them. So I actually always suggest building up to using all 3 kinds. So I would start with taking the Bacillus spore-based form, then add in the Lacto-Bifido blends, and then add in the S. Boulardii. And often the synergy between those 3 different kinds of probiotics can really just work wonders on giving the gut a nice sort of reset. Now, as a reminder, if you're familiar with my content, I always suggest fixing your upper digestive secretions first and foremost before you do any kind of intestinal work. So if you'd like more information about that, I'll link to a video below explaining exactly why that is. But if you're somebody who has already fixed their upper digestive secretions and are sort of wanting to hold off on doing any kind of formal stool testing or doing an intensive antimicrobial protocol, this would be a great option for you to try first. I think a lot of people just really want to jump into some kind of potent antibacterial or antimicrobial use, but actually the sort of gentler approach of boosting your good guys and by extension crowding out your bad guys is probably a lot less stressful for the body and preferable in many ways. Just a quick note about this: when you're doing any kind of gut work that may result in shifts in your microbiome, a die-off or Herxheimer reaction is always possible. So I always suggest going low and slow. And if you're experiencing any kind of negative reaction that doesn't subside within a week, I would definitely stop that use, maybe check in with your doctor, and potentially consider something like stool testing in the future. So one more reminder, all of my specific dosing and product suggestions are in the product guide in the description box. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned about the diverse world of probiotics and how you shouldn't just write them off because you had one lackluster or bad experience. If you've had a probiotic experience that you're just dying to tell me about, please include it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and subscribe or like. It really supports my channel. I will see you next time, and thanks for watching.